Well, I'm giving it to you, the emperor said to him. The man responded with an incredulous smile, not understanding that the emperor could give him something not belonging to him, and thus expressed no thanks to him for this. But when Grand Marshal Duroc summoned him that evening and handed him the title to the boat and the receipt from its owner, the man's joy, Duroc said to me, was delirious, and that much more so, because he had believed I was making fun of him. The emperor said he thought the boat had easily cost him 6,000 francs. It was making a man's fortune and happiness quite inexpensively. The emperor did many similar things, which he used to say a sovereign could never do enough of. The people among whom they are done remain more attached to you. They trust that when misfortune strikes, they shall also be rescued in a providential manner. The voyage was a brilliant one, and French actors came there to put on performances. The people in that city missed King Louis, but this did not prevent them from showing their enthusiasm wherever the emperor appeared. From Amsterdam, their majesties proceeded to The Hague via Haarlem and visited the port and the settlements. During a new excursion of the emperor's, the empress went to the Loo Castle, where the emperor joined her. Their majesties then went to Nijmegen and Dusseldorf and crossed the Rhine in Cologne, where feasts were given in their honor. All the city guides carrying banners with the insignia of their professions paraded below the empress's windows to cries of "Long live the emperor! Long live Empress Marie-Louise!" All the streets were festooned, decorated with tapestries, greenery, and strings of flowers. After leaving Cologne, they proceeded to Dinan. During the night, so violent a wind had risen that the pontoon bridge had been carried away. The emperor wanted to cross, but the local boatmen thought the river too swollen for anyone to attempt a crossing for 2 or 3 days. The emperor knew there were some British sailors garrisoned in the city, and he ordered that the cleverest and strongest of them be brought out. The water was rising constantly, and the current was swift and dangerous. The emperor asked the sailors if they could join together enough boats to allow this entire convoy to cross the Meuse. They replied that it was possible, but risky. His Majesty told them to begin at once. The weather was cold. On the emperor's orders, hot wine was made plentiful. In a few hours, they built a raft upon which the emperor, the empress, and the retinue first went across. Before the sun went up, the entire convoy had got across. The emperor had given each man a full set of clothes, a bonus, his freedom, with arrangements for them to go to England. There were 40 of them. On November 11th, their majesties arrived in Saint-Cloud, where they rejoined the King of Rome. France and Russia were at odds, the cause being the military occupation of the Duchy of Oldenburg by the Prince of Eckmühl-Davout on orders from the emperor. No matter how justified such an occupation was because of the enormous amount of British products being channeled through that country, no matter how much damage the continental blockade established by the emperor and recognized by Russia suffered because of this, the emperor considered the invasion by his troops to represent a lack of consideration for a princess of Russian imperial blood. He was about to blame the action taken by his lieutenant and pull out his troops when a threatening note arrived from St. Petersburg cabinet. It demanded the immediate evacuation of the duchy and the turnover of Danzig as a free city. In reparation for the occupation of the Oldenburg shoreline, this challenged the honor of France, disrupted the fine harmony existing between the two powers, and led the emperor back to the Prince of Eckmühl in the position he had just adopted. The emperor, concerned with darkening political horizon, wished to have parties and balls to entertain the empress and the young ladies at court. The most brilliant party was that given in the theater of the Tuileries Palace. Quadrilles were organized and rehearsals took place several days ahead at the small theater in the empress's apartments erected for that purpose. The emperor's 2 sisters, both remarkably attractive, took part in this. Princess Pauline came dressed as France, creating an ideal of beauty enhanced by a ravishing costume. Over a white tunic, her bosom was covered by a light breastplate covered with golden scales. She wore a light helmet of burnished gold, upon which fluttered a few white feathers. With laced boots on her feet and a half spear in her hand, she made a most ravishing picture. The Queen of Naples represented Italy. She wore a red coat embroidered with gold. As she was not as tall as her sister, Princess Pauline, this admirably rich costume appeared heavy and gave the other a fantastic appearance. The most charming ladies in court were noticed in the quadrilla. Countess Legrand, Baroness de Mescriny, and other ladies just as attractive appeared as the hours following the sun, representing the General Charles de Lagrange. The emperor had always considered widespread peace to be necessary to the regeneration of Europe. His first objective as consul had been to achieve it, and he often said that he could not be blamed for the breach of the Peace of Amiens. When he became emperor, it was known to be his constant goal, and after the Battle of Austerlitz, Friedland, Wagram, and even before crossing the Niemen, he always offered peace to England. He had no ambition to wrest the scepter of the seas away from that nation, but he wanted French vessels to be respected at sea and protected by their flag. The emperor, therefore, did no more than take part in wars that were waged against him. Before leaving Paris on such a great enterprise, the emperor held several food councils whose objective was the provisioning of Paris. For the past 2 years, the harvest had been poor. The coming year was shaping up poorly. Before leaving, he gave precise and strict orders that surplus storage facilities be filled and that bread in Paris should be maintained at a moderate price for the workers, whom he was much concerned about. He knew that the rich would always manage to buy some, whatever price it might reach. The emperor had known the effect of shortages in Paris. He knew that the people dominated by hunger could be led to all kinds of disturbances, which he wanted to avoid during his absence. Having thus established the mechanism by which his administration should operate, the emperor and empress, in the spring of 1812, left Saint-Cloud to go to Dresden, again leaving their son in the care of Countess de Montesquieu, whom they greatly trusted, and deservedly so. Everyone knows that the emperor, when handing his son, said to her, "Madame, I entrust you with the destinies of France. See to it that he becomes a good citizen and a good Christian." These words were spoken to a woman whose faith and piety were well known. Every morning, Countess de Montesquieu was in the habit of bringing the King of Rome to breakfast with the emperor, who would take him in his arms and place him in his lap. The emperor took pleasure in holding him so and playing with him and even teasing him. One morning he was playing with him and holding his small hand in his. Looking at Madame de Montesquieu, he said, "Madame, when will you make this hand able to hold a solid saber?" "Sire, before teaching him to do harm, we must teach him to do good." "That is the reply of a woman of wit," said the emperor. 2 days after leaving Saint-Cloud, the emperor and the empress arrived at Mainz, where they stayed, hosting the Grand Duke of Hesse and the Duchess of Darmstadt. From there, they went on to Frankfurt to see the Prince Primate, and then to Dresden, being honored by the princes whose states they traversed. Several sovereigns stayed in Dresden for a month. The Emperor of Austria came along with the Empress. She was said to be distant from the Empress Marie-Louise, her stepdaughter, and not to like the Emperor, who on this occasion was constantly gallant towards her. The Archdukes of Austria came. The King of Prussia came with the royal prince, his son, asking the Emperor if he would allow him to accompany him as ADC. Empress Marie-Louise displayed great luxury of dress at all the parties given during that trip. Through the elegance of her figure and the diamonds covering her, she eclipsed her stepmother, who was quite attractive, but mortified by her stepdaughter's success. The Queen of Westphalia, along with many princes of the Rhine Confederation, went to the Dresden court, visiting the good and honest King of Saxony. The emperor was like Agamemnon among all these potentates who never ceased to demonstrate their friendship toward him. It was the peak of his imperial glory. The time was not far removed when unheard of reversals would occur. All the sovereigns parted, appearing to be in the best of harmony. If the emperor counted little on Prussia that he was leaving behind him, he did not doubt the good faith of the Emperor of Austria, his father-in-law, and went into Russia full of trust in the promises given that would not allow him to believe they would be forgotten at the first battle lost. Having taken his leave of the King of Saxony and the princes of his family, the emperor left Dresden on May 29th. The empress also left a few days later. The prince went to Prague to rejoin her family, with whom she spent a month enjoying parties. The Count von Neipperg was posted as Knight of Honor in the service of the empress. In the duty quarters, he spoke to me several times of his admiration for the empress and of his Italian campaigns, where he lost an eye. I was far, then, from imagining, in his respectful relations with the empress, having reached a mature age, as he had, with a black patch over the eye that marred his face, the harmful influence he would have a few years later over the destiny of the young princess, steeped as she was in the most unquestionable virtue. Prince von Neipperg was a man of great wit, with a fine figure, as gracious as could be, and had kept a chivalrous soul and ideas. Before arriving in Prague, the empress had been complimented by both the civil and military authorities all along her route. Arches of triumph had been erected, and the population expressed great joy in seeing again the young archduchess who, in their minds, had been sacrificed to politics. Many cavalry squadrons accompanied her entrance into Prague, which took place to the sound of cannon and pealing bells. Along her path were several religious orders and guilds, making the air ring with cries of "Long live Empress Marie-Louise!" Throughout all the festivities, Her Majesty was given the place of honor. During the great galas, her chamberlain, Monsieur de Montesquieu, served her table, assisted by 2 pages, who in turn were assisted by 2 valets, from whom they received what was to be offered the Empress. The same was true for the Emperor of Austria. On July 1st, the princess left her family for Carlsbad, where the Emperor of Austria accompanied her. After a few days spent in that small town, she left her father to return to France, stopping near Metz at the home of Count de Pong, her chamberlain, where she spent the night. A most brilliant and well-organized reception had been prepared. Among the mementos left by the princess with her hosts, there is in the library a book in which she wrote gracious and kind words on their behalf. After spending the night in Chalon, she arrived on July 18th in Saint-Cloud, where she rejoined her son. Having arrived in Poland, the emperor still hoped the peace would not be disturbed. He awaited the successful outcome of Count de Narbonne's mission to Vilna, but in vain. The French army crossed the Niemen on June 24th. While the emperor was entering Moscow at the head of his army, General Millet was rekindling old plots with more audacity than means or assurance of success. Held in detention in a medical facility, he had succeeded in winning over a few officers of the reserve cohorts and of the Parisian Guard. At 3 a.m. on October 19th, these officers took their troops and had them occupy the outposts. With great audacity, General Millet freed from prison a few obscure plotters without any resources and imprisoned the minister and the prefect of police, announcing at the same time the emperor's death and the formation of a new government. This conspiracy, halted through the presence of mind of General Laborde, only lasted a few hours and changed nothing in the appearance of Paris. Had it followed its course and lasted 12 hours, it would have compromised many more people.